So our next speaker is Harold, Dr. Harold Schmitz. Harold has been in the food arena for many, many years. He was the chief science officer of Mars until 2018?
Yeah, until 2018.
2018. And he has been both of the universities as a visiting professor here in the business school. He has been co-founder, actually, we co-founded a company together, or two actually. And also he's with a March group, which is a VC fund focusing on food health. And yeah.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. So Ilias asked me to talk a little bit more, I think, on the capital markets and investment front of things, since that it takes the money for the world to go around, be it research or new businesses or whatever. So let's see it. And this is quite the dramatic title, Beyond Food Tech, Innovation, Investment, and the Future of Food. So that was fun to write that. So we could probably just stop on this slide, although I wouldn't want to, because it's a pretty depressing slide, but it's important to be, to really ground people in terms of what is happening in the world of food tech and investments into, this space known as food tech. So you can see that it went up and then it came down. And where we are in 2025 is essentially as bad as it can get, really. So that's the good news. It probably can't get any worse. It's important to understand how we got here and when it will get better. And I have a view that it will get better for reasons that we'll talk about. This is one of the this captures a lot of the reasons why things went up and then went down. You can read what's said here in this New York Times article, but there's a lot of things going on here, and we could have a focus session or a therapy session for the next hour or two to talk about it. There are some salient things that stick out. So one is the premise that environmental sustainability and/or animal rights could actually drive, blockbuster opportunities and be investable and deliver VC returns proved to not be correct. So, the main thesis of the food tech sector fell apart. It could also be said that a lot of people did not comprehend the value of domain expertise. So there were many, many smart people in the technology space they were smart in the biotech aspects and so on and so forth, but they did not have genuine sort of domain expertise in the food sector. And that definitely, led to some failures. So, we could talk a lot about a lot of different things, and you all could contribute many ideas to this, I'm sure. This is just to get into the capital markets perspective. I think, as we, bottom out and we come out of this and start to invest in, and when I say we, I mean corporates, as well as venture capitalists, as well as private equity players, as well as federal institutions who fund research, across the board, as we start to think about, what will stimulate investment and get sort of excitement going again in the sector, there is this concept called the power law. So this is a really interesting book, and this gives a great history of Silicon Valley, actually, for those of you who are interested in that. There's a lot of books out there like it. I think the introduction plus the first 3 chapters of this book are as good a history as any, so that's worth reading it. But the concept that he's talking about is the VC version of the power law. I think there's an actual mathematical, statistical definition for the power law that I'm not prepared to talk about or defend up here. So I am definitely using this in the context of, you know, of what is meant by the VC sector. Let's see if this pointer works. Yeah, sort of. So really the basic premise is that, if we move to this side before we go back, is that there's a very small number of investments that actually drive the returns portfolio for whether you're in corporate or VC or wherever. And then there's, as you go out the curve, that drops off. So the name of the game is actually, does it make financial sense to invest in a wide range of breakthrough technologies, and can you reliably not predict which of those investments is going to pay off, but that an investment is going to pay off? And that's a really, really important concept. And so on the left side here, and let's see, there we go. So here's the power law for early stage. And then there's thinking about, you know, later stage investments. And this would be where things differ between VCs and certain types of corporates and PE funds. And so you see that actually the maximum returns get pushed out with a larger number of investments. So there's thinking there. But for us in this room, you know, one of the key messages that I want us to take out of here is that, you know, this is really what it's this aspect here that we want to think about, and we want to think about, is it viable that AI can actually be a foundational reason why in the food sector there is reason to believe for financial investors that they should start taking more risks when it comes to technology investments. So is AI actually that exponential technology that actually makes this worth doing? Just this morning, this is one of my favorite slides that I use over and over again as people who see me speak know. I talked about, you know, this guy Schumpeter, you know, the process of creative destruction, and just this morning the Nobel Prize was awarded for economics 2025, and actually it was a prize that described why innovation has led to such why technology and innovation has led to such economic growth over the last couple hundred years. And then they quoted specifically Schumpeter and creative destruction. So at long last, this slide has meaning now for me to see in a contemporary sense. So I'll replace it with a much more contemporary photograph next time going forward. But the point here is that the global food system, as it stands now, is unambiguously problematic for human health and environmental health. And I said problematic. Is it? I mean, the world would be able to support 8 billion people if the food system had not been really, really helpful for human health. So, but there are problems of obesity, type 2 diabetes, et cetera, where it could be even better. And we know the environmental health issues. So there's a problem statement. And therefore, if there's a problem in a multi-trillion-dollar sector, if capitalism is allowed to operate, it means that whatever the existing companies are, they are going to be replaced either by themselves or by somebody else. So that will happen. That's the process of creative destruction. It requires the formation of new paradigms. So Thomas Kuhn is the bottom photograph there. You know, he wrote the theory of scientific revolutions, and it's about paradigm shift. And I would posit to you that a paradigm shift for the global food system cannot be achieved by the existing legacy companies alone. There has to be this introduction of new technologies, new startups in the mix. And that's what makes it exciting from a capital markets investing perspective. And so to that point, and why this room is so important functionally speaking, is that this kind of innovation is a team event. So it's not a Lone Ranger event. AI is a team event by definition. AI is about, as you all know better than I do, it's about creating the most powerful of networks through data as well as human intelligence. And so the network is what it's all about when it comes to innovation, not the singular product, it's the network. And you should think of yourselves as this is an innovation network here. We know that there's a new paradigm at play in life sciences. So, the 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry was awarded in effect for AI, also in physics. One of Elias's former advisors, John Hopfield, won a Nobel Prize. So 2024 was the year of the Nobel Prize for AI, basically. So we know this is happening. And why is it happening? You all will know better than me, but my, layman understanding is really, AlphaFold was as much about or enabled by the proprietary data asset that was able to be generated. It was that commitment that actually enabled this breakthrough to happen. And that's profoundly important for thinking about the food system and applying AI to it. And this is one of the take-home messages, is if we really want to drive AI as a power law sort of breakthrough and getting folks excited again about investing capital into the food system, then we need to think deeply about what are the most important proprietary or data assets, be they proprietary, public, or a combination of both. So AI is revolutionizing the pharmaceutical sector. I don't know if these numbers are exactly right or not, but they're based on credible sources that our team put together, and so AI is revolutionizing the pharmaceutical sector. And like that bottom part is interesting. It's not just the drug design and development itself, but it's actually the processes that surround its evaluation, clinical trials, so on and so forth. And I think this is worth thinking about. So in this context of there is a new paradigm in life sciences, it's called AI. The pharmaceutical sector is being revolutionized by AI. And so how does one orient to that? Well, if you're in the pharmaceutical sector, actually this is a really, really interesting article, and these quotes are, because it's saying the revolution is less about cost savings and getting more efficient at what you already do, but actually more exciting and a power law type of investment if we utilize AI at the center of our R&D and new product development, which is super interesting. And then this bottom sentence is really, really interesting, because this comes into the organizational theory that all of us deal with one way or the other, and that is, well, should I build it or buy it? That would be the classic discussion. When it comes to integrating AI into the center of your enterprise, partnership and network probably is the way to go. In other words, if I'm in my old job in Mars, I wouldn't want to build my AI capability. I would actually want to buy a strategic partner, because that way the strategic partner could do what they do best and keep up with the field, which is what this CEO from Merck Healthcare is saying. So it's really interesting to think about that. AI will revolutionize the food sector. It is, there's zero doubt that is going to happen. It is going to happen, but when? That's actually, timing is everything. If AI is going to revolutionize the food sector 20 years from now, that doesn't mean any of us should stop what we're doing, but we need to think about the pacing and how we're going to do things. Or If it's going to revolutionize in the next 5 years, well, that's a different discussion. Or if we happen to be in positions of power where we can make it happen in the next 3 to 5 years, well, that's a thing too. But there is massive underinvestment in AI for food, so we should acknowledge that. Why is that? I believe there's a lack of domain expertise. Like people don't actually in the field trying to do this, that they're not really thinking deeply enough and have the expertise yet, brought together. It's like, what are the data assets that are going to be the most valuable, and why? And food is incredibly complex, so even when we identify the right data assets, it's like, how do we actually efficiently, obtain those data assets? And I think once we are able to articulate that better and more convincingly, that's going to open up a lot of capital opportunities in the boardrooms as well as the investment firms. So here's, for those of you who are not in the industrial sector, this is one version of the truth that I think captures it pretty well, which is we are a buy, make, and sell business. And if you want the highest margin, then you buy, make, and sell branded ingredients, or you attach yourselves, if you're a supplier, to the highest value brands. And that's where, that's where the margin comes in. And then, there's these aspects in food. I narrow it down to 5. It can be more or less, but my version is there's 5. Taste, health and nutrition, environmental sustainability, affordability, and scalability. For the past 150 years, we have done taste, affordability, and scalability really, really well. No question about it. And so what we haven't done really well is this health and nutrition, environmental sustainability part. I do think we have proven in the last 15 years that environmental sustainability is not going to actually enable exponential returns for investors as much as we need it. I think we just need to acknowledge that. There's some exceptions, but health and nutrition is a different story. Why is that? It's because all of us are consumers, and consumers generally want to A, live forever, and B, have a great time when they're doing it. And everybody, can get their head around, this stuff I put in my mouth every day actually can, has a role in that. So there's a business proposition there that is extremely valuable. So if we can figure out where AI should fit in that proposition, then I think we can get into this exponential returns and power law thing. We've had one in Davis, very, very, very small successful experience, and there's a lot of cool quotes up here which drive at why AI made a big difference for launching this startup and enabled it to do different and better things than had there not been AI in the mix wouldn't have happened. So, but this is wonderful. It was actually written about by Yolanda, who's in the audience today. She recognizes the quotes, and it's true, but it's really, really small. So it's not like we've had a billion-dollar blockbuster success. But here we go. If we're waiting to see what the area is going to be that actually will bring, the capital markets roaring back into play with food tech and where AI can play a role, there is no question that the Ozempic era, where this is sort of first generation of GLP-1 drugs and now the second gen that's coming very quickly, this has blown the door open for this. So we now have the food sector actually has an opportunity to create a massive new category of offerings that are centered around an understanding and a consumer ability to control their metabolic health in a way they never were able to do before. This is, you cannot actually overstate how interesting this is from a wealth creation opportunity in terms of a new category in a multi-trillion-dollar sector. So we have it now. So there we go. We have our Sputnik moment, as I put, it's like, 1957, Sputnik goes overhead and that unleashes capital flow in the US into, entire new industries. This is the Sputnik moment for the food sector. Exponential potential for molecular understanding is going to be really, really important here. Mariana is in the back. She worked for a guy named Carlito Labrilla, who has created something called the Glycopedia, and to me this represents this new era of new technologies, in this case in mass spectrometry and chromatography, that enable us to go from heroic efforts to understand a few new molecules in the natural product space that are food and nutrition and dietary supplements, to actually being able to identify hundreds of thousands and millions of these natural product molecules, so that we can understand sensory effects better, health and nutrition effects better, textural effects better, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's an intersection between AI and this new molecular understanding that we can generate at these unprecedented levels. The reason I'm putting this up here is that the GLP-1 drug era, the Ozempic era, is now resonating with and connecting with gut health in a spectacular way in the consumer marketplace. So consumers are already becoming really interested in gut health. We see PepsiCo buying Poppy, we see Olipop rising, so these are kind of really interesting, low billions of dollars sort of transactions happening in gut health. And then all of a sudden, Ozempic comes onto the scene, and one of the key areas that needs to be solved and understood is, hey, what's going on at the gut level, ranging from food and nutrition as well as the side effects of the molecules. So this would be an example of a convergence zone between the Ozempic era, molecular understanding at unprecedented levels, and then utilizing AI to help, uncover specific things that are interesting. I'll move through here quickly, but just this was the example. My career was built on doing this kind of thing in chocolate. We created the dark chocolate category, worth billions and billions of dollars, and that was based on this sort of caveman-esque, or Neanderthal type of heroic effort, which was all we had, So we heroically did our HPLC MS with the tools we had in the 1990s, and we were able to do this, but that's nothing compared to what's now available in the Genome Center, Carlito's lab, so on and so forth. The innovation is the network. I think the UC Davis ecosystem is a perfect representation of that. I think we should, as an APHIS organization, make sure that as many people understand that as possible, and then also make sure our industry collaborators are able to access this remarkable network that extends to Denmark, if you'll notice. So the network is the innovation, we've got that. And then I just wanted to sort of conclude by noting a few areas that I think are really exciting for AI and food product development. I mentioned the molecular understanding. Ned was speaking about the circular bioeconomy. There's this incredible opportunity to leverage molecular understanding and other data inputs to actually, with AI, to understand how to get value out of waste streams. Of course, biotechnology. I think that there is an opportunity with food science and technology to put AI at the center. We were talking last night at dinner. I really, really wish that here at UC Davis, we would somehow institutionalize AI at the center of our food science and technology department. I realize how difficult that is. It's so easy to say, it's so hard to do, but I think it's, given what the stakes that are on the table, it's something we ought to try to do. And it would be a role model for the world. And then this integration with consumer understanding, insights, and marketing. It is so, this is what AI can enable us to do in food product development, which is to take this massive data from the consumer insights marketing world, which is sort of like the high priests who protect things, behind curtains and layers of, the truth is so valuable you have to protect it with a cage of lies sort of thing. Now we don't have to do that. We can actually leverage AI at the center of our new product development pipeline in the food world, and that enables us to merge consumer insights and marketing insights with product development and supply chain insights with scientific understanding and molecular mapping. And I think that's where AI can sit, is at the center of that. This was just kind of a slide to mention, like on the far right there, you see actually that's an example of where integration is happening. Novo Nordisk Pharmaceutical is now collaborating with Novonesis, the food ingredient company, to actually study GLP-1s and opportunities. And this is the last slide. Beyond food tech, I think that the bottom line is that consumer health trends, they've been happening for the last few decades. The GLP-1 era, the Ozempic era, has brought this to a crystallized sort of moment where, it's just overwhelming now. So there's a demand for a new food paradigm. Creative destruction is inevitable, and AI should be at the center of this. That really is the strategic imperative, or else we're not going to be able to deliver properly. And I think our Sputnik moment really is the Ozempic era, plus the ultra-processed food conundrum, and again, that's a whole separate thing, plus the Make America Healthy Again movement, which is affiliated with the political party, but I think actually came before the party and will last after the party. I think it's a thing, and I think those three together are the Sputnik moment. And then what else? Don't confuse enthusiasm with expertise and experience. We spoke about that. And I guess the last thing I would say is and maybe when we institutionalize AI at the center of the Food Science and Technology Department here at UC Davis, a core founding principle will be that it's about the human intelligence plus the artificial intelligence plus the smartest approach to which data assets should be collected to really drive this thing. So, thank you very much.
Okay, some questions.
Thank you for sharing this fantastic talk. I really love that you use as an example what's happening in the pharmaceutical industry, where it's going really well and they're using AI really well. They're making great profit, but in food industry, it's not. So one thought that I had was, could it be that in food industry there are so many competitors? And so if you develop AI, if you use AI to optimize formulation of product or make it automate production, everybody else will do it, and then all of a sudden it's not that you have advantage, everybody has advantage. And on top of that, there are so many different products, and people have a limited capacity to purchase. Like, you cannot purchase and eat more than you already do. You can eat a little more, but then you become obesity and stuff. So is it like, what's the reason in your opinion that we cannot do, or maybe we will be able to do what pharma, for example, is doing?
Yeah, so good point. And the bottom bullet point was intellectual property, which I didn't speak to, but it's really at the heart of what you're raising. Intellectual property matters just as much in the food sector as it does the pharmaceutical sector. Their intellectual property is not just patents, it's a strategy of, trade secret and patent and publication and human capital, etc., trademark. I think that, to me, the answer to your question is, which is why I was driving on this data asset thing, is I don't believe that in the food space we have thought deeply enough and strategically enough and with enough focus about deciding which data assets are worth investing in to drive the competitive advantage that would get at what you're saying. So AlphaFold, they made a call. We're gonna figure out protein design. And they invested, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 or $600 million in collecting the data asset they needed for that. it doesn't always require 500 or 600 million dollars, but what it does require is conviction and focus about what is the data asset that we're really gonna go after to drive competitive differentiation where it matters the most from an investor perspective. And I don't think we've done that. I think in the food space, you've clearly tapped something here, but I think in the food space, what we have done, and I've done it myself, is like, oh my God, our factory operations could be so much more efficient, if we apply AI. And yes, that's true. But those gains are not what's actually gonna unlock the capital flows, So, I mean, every food company already has efficiency programs for their factory footprint. So, does that make sense?
One more question. Okay, I have a question for you, Harold. So what are we lacking? I mean, why? I mean, I understand we haven't done that in the food space. How can we push? How can we force for this to happen now versus 2 years from now?
I mean, I have a view, of course, but my view, it's the network effect, which is obviously, a fundamental premise of what I was talking about. And I not so subtly put up the slide with, California and UC Davis specifically. I think that if UC Davis itself, if those entities that I had up there actually, along with others on campus with purpose, decided they wanted to interact together and drive the breakthrough in AI at the center of food product development, we would actually make it happen. But it requires that conviction and commitment of wanting to act as a purposeful network.
But I have one more question or add on to that. It was a comparison of the food industry to the pharmaceutical industry.
Mm-hmm.
Pharmaceutical industry, I think, has a much longer term outlook than the food industry does, and also operates at a completely different profit margin than the food industry does.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
So on the last one, I think that is it's a red herring in the sense that yes, profit margins are different, and that drives certain investment behaviors, but the total value of the sectors is not dissimilar. They're both, massively valuable sectors. There's just different, every industrial sector has its peculiar dynamics. I think where you're going, which is really, really important, is that for that power law graph that I had up there, there's no difference in the hit rate between early stage venture investments between pharma sector and food sector. What is different is the predictability or reliability is very different. Why is that? It's because if you're developing new drugs, there is a prescribed pathway that will not be deviated from, and you can value each of those milestones. Whereas in the food space, we haven't yet sort of articulated that roadmap yet. And so it's hard from a financial perspective to, it's like the path is not narrow, even though the path ends up at the same place, which is generally failing, but when you succeed, you make a lot of money,
Thank you.
Thank you.